"Spread your legs," the mountain man told the outcast, but his real intention shocked her. Elena had once lived a normal life, the kind of life most people never think twice about. She had a small apartment, a steady job at a local store, and a simple daily routine. Every morning she woke up early, made herself a cup of tea, and walked to work. In the evenings, she returned home tired but peaceful. She didn't have many friends, but she didn't feel lonely. Her life was quiet, steady, and safe. But life can change slowly, and sometimes it changes all at once. The store where she worked closed after the owner fell into financial trouble. At first, Elena was not too worried. She believed she would find another job soon. She searched every day, walking across town, asking in shops, cafes, and offices. Some people told her they were not hiring. Others said they would call her later, but no calls ever came. Weeks turned into months. Her savings began to disappear. The rent became difficult to pay. She started skipping meals to make her money last longer. She told herself it was only temporary. Things would get better. But they didn't. One day her landlord knocked on her door. He was not unkind, but he was firm. He told her he could not wait any longer. She needed to pay the rent or leave. Elena tried to explain her situation, but he shook his head. He had his own problems too. That evening, Elena packed her few belongings into 2 old bags. When she closed the apartment door behind her, she stood in the hallway for a long moment. It was strange how quickly a place stopped being home. At first, she stayed with a distant relative, but the welcome did not last long. People become uncomfortable when someone stays too long without a clear plan. She could see the change in their faces, hear it in their voices. After 2 weeks, they told her gently that she needed to find another place. After that, Elena began sleeping wherever she could. Some nights she stayed in cheap rooms. Other nights she rested on benches or in quiet corners where no one would bother her. She kept moving, trying not to attract attention. The hardest part was not the cold or the hunger. The hardest part was the way people looked at her. Before, she had been invisible in a normal way. Now she was invisible in a different way. People avoided her eyes. Some crossed the street when they saw her coming. Shop owners watched her closely, as if she might steal something. Even when she asked politely about work, their expressions showed doubt. Whispers began to follow her. In a small town, people notice everything. Some said she was unlucky. Others said she must have done something wrong to end up like this. No one asked her what really happened. Days passed, and hope became harder to hold. Winter was coming. The air grew colder, and the wind became sharp and dry. Elena knew she could not survive long outside once the snow began. She needed a place, any place, where she could stay safe. One evening she sat near the edge of town, watching the mountains in the distance. The peaks were tall and quiet, covered with dark forest and early snow. Most people avoided those mountains. The paths were difficult, and the weather could change quickly. But Elena had heard something before. Travelers sometimes spoke about old cabins hidden in the forest. Some were empty, some were used by hunters or people who lived alone. Far from town, that night she made a decision. She had nothing left to lose. Early the next morning, before the town fully woke up, Elena began walking toward the mountains. The road slowly turned into a narrow path. The houses disappeared behind her. Soon there were only trees, rocks, and the sound of the wind moving through the branches. At first, the walk felt peaceful. The air was fresh and clean. No one stared at her. No one whispered. For the first time in many months, she felt free from judgment. But the mountains were not gentle. The path became steep and uneven. Small stones slipped under her shoes. The cold air burned in her lungs as she climbed higher. She stopped often to rest, holding her bags tightly, trying to save her energy. Hours passed. The sun moved slowly across the sky. Her legs grew heavy, and her stomach ached with hunger. She had only a small piece of bread left, and she ate it carefully, making it last as long as possible. By afternoon, the temperature dropped even more. Clouds covered the sun, and the wind became stronger. Elena began to worry that she had made a mistake. What if there were no cabins?
What if night came before she found shelter? Still, she kept walking.
Turning back did not feel like an option anymore. As evening approached, her steps became slower and unsteady. Her hands were cold and stiff. The forest around her looked the same in every direction. Tall pine trees standing close together, their shadows growing longer. Then, just as she was about to sit down and rest again, she saw something through the trees. At first, she thought it was only her imagination, but as she walked closer, she saw it clearly. A small wooden cabin stood between the trees. It was simple and old, with a sloped roof and a narrow porch. Smoke rose gently from a metal pipe above the roof. Someone was inside. Elena stopped a short distance away. Her heart began to beat faster. Part of her felt relief. Another part felt fear. What if the person inside told her to leave? What if they became angry that a stranger had come here? She had been rejected so many times that she expected it now, almost automatically. The wind blew colder, reminding her she could not stand there forever. Slowly, she walked toward the door. Each step felt heavy. Her hands trembled as she lifted one hand and knocked. For a moment, nothing happened. Then she heard movement inside. The door opened. A tall man stood there, broad-shouldered, with a thick beard and weathered clothes. His face was serious and quiet, like someone who was used to being alone. His sharp eyes studied her carefully without speaking. Elena suddenly felt small and unsure. She held her bags tightly and spoke in a soft, tired voice. "I'm sorry to bother you," she said. "I don't have anywhere to go. I just need a place to rest for a little while." He looked at her face, her worn clothes, her shaking hands. For a long moment, the only sound was the wind moving through the trees. Elena prepared herself for another rejection. But then, without a word, the man stepped aside and opened the door wider. It was a simple gesture, but to Elena, it felt like the first kindness she had received in a very long time. Elena stepped inside the cabin slowly, her eyes adjusting to the dim light. The room was small but neat. Wooden walls, a simple table, a few chairs, and a fireplace with a gentle fire burning. The warmth hit her like a soft blanket, and she felt her tired muscles relax just a little. For the first time in weeks, she could feel a small spark of safety. The man who had opened the door did not speak. He simply motioned for her to sit near the fire. Elena hesitated for a moment, then carefully placed her bags on the floor and sat down. The fire crackled, and the faint smell of burning wood filled the room. Outside, the wind howled through the trees, but inside, it felt quiet and calm. After a few minutes, the man finally spoke. His voice was deep, but not unkind. "You look like you need food," he said. Without waiting for an answer, he disappeared into a small kitchen area and returned with a bowl of warm soup and some bread. Elena's hands shook as she took the bowl. She had been hungry for days. The smell alone made her stomach twist painfully. "Thank you," she whispered. She had forgotten how much a small kindness could mean. The man nodded once and then went back to his own corner of the cabin, sitting silently. Elena realized that he was not the kind of person who asked questions about the past or tried to make conversation. There was no small talk, no judgment. He simply offered help. And in a world where she had been rejected over and over, that felt strange but good. She ate slowly, savoring each bite. The warmth of the soup spread through her body. Her lips, chapped from the cold, felt soft again. As she finished the meal, she looked at the man, hoping to say something more, but he remained quiet, busy with small tasks around the cabin. After eating, she moved closer to the fire to warm her hands. The cold outside had seeped into her bones, and it would take time for it to leave. She watched the flames dance, feeling an odd mixture of fear and relief. Fear because she didn't know him or why he had helped her. Relief because, for the first time in a long time, she felt safe. The man eventually spoke again, his voice calm but firm. "You should rest. The night is coming, and it will be colder than you expect." She wanted to ask more, to know his name or why he lives so far from town, but she did not. Somehow, she felt that asking questions was unnecessary. This man had offered her help, without explanation, without judgment. That was enough for now. She settled onto a small cot in the corner of the cabin. The bed was thin but clean. She pulled a blanket over herself and tried to sleep. The sound of the wind outside and the faint crackle of the fire were oddly comforting. She had not slept well for weeks. Her mind was full of worry, fear, and memories of rejection. But here, she could almost forget them. The next morning she awoke to the smell of burning wood and a new sense of hope. The man had already started moving around the cabin, chopping wood and tidying the small space. He didn't speak, but his presence felt reassuring. Elena stepped outside to breathe the fresh mountain air. The cabin was surrounded by tall pine trees, their branches heavy with early snow. The wind was strong, but the sun was shining. She realized how far she had walked yesterday, and how easy it would have been to get lost in the mountains. Without this cabin, she might not have survived the night. The man approached her and handed her a small cup of warm tea. Elena accepted it gratefully. The tea was simple but strong, and the warmth helped wake her body and clear her mind. She drank slowly, watching him move around with quiet efficiency, stacking firewood and checking the small traps he had set outside. Finally, he spoke. "You will need to learn some things if you are going to stay here for a while." Elena blinked. She had not expected to stay. She thought this was just temporary, a single night of safety. But somehow, his words made sense. She realized that if she stayed in the mountains, she would need to be careful. The world here was beautiful, but it was also dangerous. "What things?" she asked, softly, trying not to sound too eager or too afraid. "How to move through the snow," he replied. "How to keep warm. How to find food. How to survive if the weather turns bad." Elena nodded slowly. She had never thought of herself as someone strong or capable. Most of her life had been ordinary, safe, predictable. But now she understood that survival required strength, and she would need guidance. Over the next few days, the man began teaching her small tasks. At first, it was simple things: how to chop wood safely without hurting herself, how to start a fire quickly, how to carry water from the stream without spilling it. Every task seemed small, but each one was important. Each one made her feel a little stronger. She noticed something else about him, too. He never rushed her. If she made a mistake, he corrected her gently, showing her again and again until she understood. There was patience in his actions, a quiet strength that did not demand respect, but earned it. One afternoon, he took her outside. The snow was soft under their boots, and the path ahead was narrow and winding. "The mountains can be dangerous," he said. "You need to know how to walk in them safely. Watch your step, and don't be afraid of the snow. Let it support you, not slow you down." Elena watched as he moved carefully, placing each foot with precision. Then he gestured for her to follow. Her first few steps were clumsy. The snow slipped under her boots, and she stumbled. He remained close but silent, letting her learn through experience. After a while, she began to get the rhythm. She noticed how small movements and careful steps made a big difference. The snow, once terrifying, became something she could work with. A sense of accomplishment warmed her more than the fire ever could. Each day she learned something new: how to find edible plants, how to identify safe paths, how to ration supplies. He'd taught her how to read the sky for signs of weather change. At night, he showed her how to keep warm, how to layer her clothing, and how to rest without losing energy. Slowly, Elena began to change. The woman who had wandered the streets, hungry, tired, and afraid, was becoming someone capable and confident. She still carried fear, but now it was mixed with determination. And through it all, the man remained quiet but steady. He never asked her about her past. He never judged her for being alone or hungry. He simply showed her how to survive and trust herself again. Elena began to feel something she had not felt in a long time: hope. She realized that her life could change, not because someone else gave her a handout, but because she was learning to stand on her own feet. The mountains, harsh as they were teaching her strength, patience, and resilience. And though she didn't understand him fully, she began to see the man not as a stranger, but as a teacher. Not in the way a school teacher teaches from books, but in the way life teaches when someone shows you the path without expecting anything in return. For the first time in months, Elena felt like she belonged somewhere. Not in the town that had judged her, not in the streets that had ignored her, but here, in the quiet mountains, with someone who simply let her be. And that realization, small as it seemed, gave her the courage to continue. The mornings in the mountains were quiet, almost magical. Sunlight filtered through the tall pine trees, casting long shadows on the snow-covered ground. Elena woke to the smell of burning wood and the soft sound of the wind rustling through the branches. For the first time in weeks, she felt alive in a way she hadn't before. She stretched and rubbed her cold hands together, still feeling a little sore from the days of climbing and learning. The mountain man had already begun moving around the cabin when she got up. He was outside, stacking firewood with steady, careful movements. Even though he did not speak much, his presence felt protective. Elena admired the quiet way he worked. Everything he did seemed precise, necessary, and calm. Watching him, she realized she could learn not only survival skills, but also the way he carried himself. There was a strength in his quietness, something she had never known before. "Today," he said after a while, his deep voice carrying across the snow, "you will need to walk carefully in the deep snow. Watch how your feet move. If you slip, you can fall badly." Elena nodded. She had learned many things over the past few days, but snow walking was new. The snow outside was thick, soft, and powdery. It looked harmless, but she knew from experience that it could hide holes, rocks, or slippery ice. One wrong step could hurt badly. The man stepped aside and gestured for her to follow him along a narrow path he had cleared between the trees. "Spread your legs," he said. For a moment, Elena froze. The words startled her. Her mind immediately imagined the worst. Years of fear, rejection, and danger made her cautious, even suspicious of strangers. She took a small step back, unsure what he meant. The man noticed her hesitation and spoke again, his voice calm but firm. "Spread your legs. That is how you walk in deep snow. You balance yourself. You do not fall. Watch carefully." Then she looked down at the snow. It was almost waist-high in some places. She realized he meant exactly what he said. By spreading her legs slightly and taking slow, careful steps, she could move without sinking or losing her balance. She felt a wave of relief mixed with embarrassment. She had been so quick to fear that she had almost misunderstood him, but now she saw clearly. This was a lesson in survival, not anything else. The mountain man demonstrated again, slowly lifting his legs and placing them carefully in the snow, almost like a dance. Elena copied him, first hesitantly, then with a little more confidence. Her first few steps were clumsy, but the man remained close, silently encouraging her with his presence.
"You see," he said finally, a small smile breaking through his serious expression.
"The snow can be your friend if you know how to move in it. If you do not, it can hurt you." Elena nodded, feeling the truth of his words. It was strange, but almost poetic. Something as ordinary as walking could be a life lesson. She realized that in many ways her life had been like this snow, unpredictable, dangerous, but also full of hidden opportunities if she learned to navigate carefully. They spent the morning practicing. Step by step, Elena learned how to feel the snow beneath her boots, how to shift her weight to avoid sinking, and how to keep her balance on icy patches. It was exhausting work. Her legs ached, her back was sore, and her hands were stiff from the cold. But she also felt pride. But each step she took successfully made her feel stronger. Each time she avoided a slip, she felt a small victory. After hours of practice, the man finally motioned for a break. They sat on a fallen log, steaming cups of tea in their hands. The forest around them was quiet, almost still. Only the occasional bird called or the wind whispered through the branches. "You are learning quickly," he said. "Most people would give up after the first hour."
"You did not."
Elena felt a small smile form on her lips. Compliments were rare in her life, and she had almost forgotten the feeling of being recognized for effort.
"I want to learn," she said softly. "I want to survive here, not just hide." He nodded, but did not answer. His quiet approval was enough. Elena realized that sometimes actions and presence were more powerful than words. He did not need to tell her she was doing well. She could see it in the way he observed her, the way he allowed her to try and fail, and then try again. As the day went on, he began teaching her more advanced skills: how to identify the safest paths between trees and rocks, how to use small branches to test snow depth, how to step lightly so the snow did not trap her feet. Each lesson was small but vital. Each moment was a challenge. Elena's confidence grew. Where she had once been afraid to take a single step through the snow, she now moved with purpose. She noticed how her body had become stronger, how her legs and core muscles worked together to maintain balance. She felt more alert, more alive than she had in months. At one point, she looked at the man and realized something important. He had never asked about her past. He had never judged her for being alone, poor, or rejected. All he wanted was to teach her how to survive, to give her a chance to stand on her own feet. That was a kindness she had never expected. Her thoughts wandered as she walked. She remembered the cold nights on the streets, the feeling of being invisible, the way people had avoided her or whispered about her. She realized how much she had carried fear with her every day. But here in the mountains, she could leave that fear behind. Each careful step in the snow felt like a step away from her old life, away from fear and shame. By late afternoon, the wind began to pick up, and the sky turned gray. Snowflakes drifted slowly from the clouds. The man gestured for her to head back to the cabin. Elena followed, her steps more confident than they had been that morning. She felt tired but accomplished. She had learned something vital, not just about walking in snow, but about trust, patience, and perseverance. Back at the cabin, the man built a fire while Elena sat close, warming her frozen fingers. She realized that this was not just about survival in the mountains. It was about learning to survive life itself, learning to face fear, to trust, and to grow stronger with each challenge. Later, as night fell and the snow continued to fall outside, Elena felt a quiet sense of pride. She had misunderstood the man's words at first, and yet he had been patient, teaching her without anger or criticism. She realized that sometimes lessons come in ways we do not expect. Sometimes the shock of misunderstanding can lead to the deepest understanding. Before going to sleep that night, she looked out the small window at the white, silent forest. She thought about the path she had walked today, the steps she had learned, and the small victories she had achieved. She realized that the mountains were harsh, but they were fair. They gave strength to those willing to learn, and she had proven to herself that she was willing. And in that quiet moment, she understood something new. Survival was not just about strength, or speed, or skill. It was about patience, courage, and the ability to trust in oneself and sometimes in others. As she drifted to sleep, the fire glowing softly beside her, Elena felt a sense of peace. The mountains had taught her something that no town, no stranger, and no hardship had taught her before. And although tomorrow would bring new challenges, she felt ready to face them. She had taken her first real steps toward becoming someone capable, someone strong, someone who could stand tall even in the most difficult conditions. The following days brought a new challenge for Elena. The snow had thickened, covering the forest floor with a soft, white blanket. It was beautiful, almost magical, but the beauty hid danger. Every step could hide a hidden hole, a slippery patch of ice, or a weak branch ready to snap under weight. The mountains were no longer just a place to practice. They were teaching her the harsh reality of survival. The mountain man observed her closely as she prepared to leave the cabin that morning. His movements were calm and deliberate, his eyes scanning the horizon and the snow-covered trees. He handed her a small, sturdy walking stick and pointed toward the trail that led deeper into the forest. "Today you will go farther," he said. "The snow will be deeper. You must watch every step, keep your balance, and do not hurry." Elena nodded, gripping the stick tightly. She felt a mixture of excitement and fear. The trail ahead was unknown. Even though she had learned to walk in snow and follow the man's careful guidance, the mountains had a way of reminding anyone who entered that they were not to be underestimated. They started slowly. Elena placed each foot carefully, spreading her legs and testing the snow. The mountain man walked beside her, pointing out weak spots, showing her how to shift her weight if the snow gave way, and reminding her to breathe steadily. Every step was exhausting, but she kept going. As they climbed higher, the wind picked up. It howled through the trees, whipping snow into swirling clouds that made it hard to see. Elena wrapped her scarf tighter around her face and focused on the trail. Her legs burned from the effort of climbing, and her lungs felt heavy from the cold air. She wanted to give up, to sit down in the snow and rest, but the mountain man remained beside her, patient and steady, silently encouraging her to continue. At one point, the snow beneath Elena's boots shifted suddenly. She lost her balance and stumbled. Her heart raced. She froze, unsure if she would fall or be able to recover. The mountain man stepped forward instantly, steadying her with a firm but gentle grip. "You are learning," he said calmly. "Even when you fall, you can get up. That is what matters." His words surprised her. She had spent so many months feeling like every mistake defined her, that every slip was a failure. But here, she realized that mistakes were part of learning. Falling did not mean she was weak. It meant she was trying. They continued upward, the snow growing deeper and heavier. The path narrowed and the trees became sparse. The wind was stronger now, and the cold bit through her clothing. Elena's fingers and toes grew numb, but she pressed on, remembering the lessons she had learned. Step by step, she moved carefully, following the mountain man's instructions and trusting herself. Suddenly, they came to a small clearing. The wind was strongest here, and the snow fell in thick sheets. A fallen tree blocked part of the path. Elena froze. She had not expected this obstacle, and fear surged through her. The path beyond seemed dangerous, and she thought of turning back. The mountain man approached her and pointed to the tree. "You can climb over it," he said. "Use your hands and your legs. Watch carefully. Take your time." Elena took a deep breath. She felt her heart pounding. The snow was soft, but it could not cushion a fall from the tree. She hesitated, thinking of all the times she had given up before, all the times she had allowed fear to stop her. But she also remembered the small victories of the past days, learning to walk in snow, balancing on slippery paths, trusting herself. Carefully, she placed her hands on the tree and lifted one leg over, then the other. The snow beneath her feet shifted, but she held on tightly. Step by step, she moved forward, her hands raw from the cold, her muscles burning with effort. She made it across. The mountain man nodded silently, a small but clear sign of approval. Elena realized something important at that moment. Survival was not just about strength or skill. It was about courage, patience, and the willingness to face fear. Every step in the snow, every careful movement, was teaching her more than just how to move safely. It was teaching her how to trust herself, how to believe in her own abilities, and how to face challenges without giving up. The wind howled even louder as they continued their climb. Snow whipped against her face, making it hard to see. Her hands and feet were numb, and she felt her energy fading. But she pressed on, keeping her focus on each step, 1 foot at a time. Suddenly, the trail narrowed dangerously along a small cliff. A misstep here could mean falling down the slope. Elena's heart raced. She had never felt such fear, not even on the streets when she was alone and hungry. But she remembered the mountain man's lessons: slow steps, balance, trust yourself. She spread her legs, planted her walking stick firmly, and moved forward, inch by inch. The mountain man stayed close, silently guiding her, ready to steady her if she slipped. The minutes felt like hours, but Elena kept moving. She could feel her heart pounding, her body screaming for rest, but she refused to give in. When they finally reached a safe spot, a small plateau with a clear view of the surrounding mountains, Elena collapsed to her knees in the snow. Her hands were frozen, her legs shook with exhaustion, but she felt a thrill of triumph she had never known before. She had faced fear and danger and survived. She had taken the mountains seriously, and the mountains had allowed her to continue. The mountain man gave her a small nod, then set up a simple area to rest. He prepared a warm drink and handed it to her. Elena drank slowly, feeling the warmth spread through her body. She looked around at the vast, snow-covered mountains. They were beautiful, terrifying, and powerful, much like life itself. And yet, she felt stronger, braver, and more capable than she had in years. As night fell, the temperature dropped further. The wind howled outside, and the snow fell in thick sheets. Elena sat close to the fire, thinking about everything she had experienced that day. She had learned to trust herself, to face danger, and to persevere through exhaustion and fear. She realized that these lessons were not just for the mountains. They were for life. The mountain man moved silently around the cabin, preparing for the night. He had shown her how to keep warm, how to layer clothing, how to conserve energy, and how to rest safely. Elena followed his instructions carefully. She realized that survival was not just about brute strength. It was about knowledge, preparation, and patience. That night, as she lay on her cot, Elena reflected on how far she had come. Just a few weeks ago, she had been wandering the streets, cold, hungry, and afraid. Now she had learned to survive in one of the harshest environments she had ever encountered. She had faced fear, physical exhaustion, and danger, and she had overcome them. For the first time in months, she felt proud of herself. She had learned to trust herself, to take small steps forward even when the path was frightening. She realized that courage was not the absence of fear, but the decision to keep moving forward despite it. As she drifted to sleep, Elena understood something deep and important. Survival was not only about reaching safety or finding shelter. It was about growing stronger, learning to trust oneself, and discovering that even in the most difficult conditions, a person could endure, adapt, and thrive. And as the wind howled outside and the snow continued to fall, Elena felt a quiet sense of accomplishment. She had faced one of her greatest challenges and had emerged stronger. The mountains had tested her, but she had passed the test. And in that moment, she knew that she was ready for whatever came next. Spring arrived, slowly in the mountains. The snow melted in patches, and the small streams that had been frozen began to flow again. Birds returned to the trees, singing quietly in the mornings. The air smelled fresh, carrying hints of new life and growth. Elena noticed the changes around her, but she also realized that the changes inside her were even greater. She had grown stronger over the winter. Her body had adapted to the cold, the long walks, and the hard work of survival. Her mind had grown stronger too. She felt more patient, more aware, and more confident than she had in months, or maybe even years. Each day in the mountains had been a lesson, and now she understood the depth of what she had learned. The mountain man remained quiet as ever, but Elena had come to understand his ways. He did not give empty praise. He did not ask questions about her past. He simply guided her, helped her learn, and allowed her to grow at her own pace. His actions had taught her more than words ever could. One morning he approached her with a calm expression and said, "The snow is gone from the lower paths. The trails are open. You can return to town if you wish." Elena looked at him, her heart sinking slightly. She had grown used to the mountains, to the quiet rhythm of the cabin, and even to the man's serious presence. The idea of leaving felt strange, even scary, but she also knew that staying here forever was not possible. She had survived the winter, learned to trust herself, and grown stronger. Now it was time to face the next challenge, life beyond the mountains. "I think I am ready," she said quietly. She could feel the mix of excitement and fear rising in her chest. "I want to try again, in town." He handed her a small pack of supplies, some dried food, a few extra clothes, and a warm blanket. "You are ready," he said simply. "Remember what you have learned. Trust yourself, one step at a time." Elena took a deep breath. She felt gratitude swelling in her chest, not only for his guidance, but for the patience, quiet strength, and trust he had shown her. He had never judged her, never doubted her, and had given her the tools to survive when no one else had. The journey back to town was different from the climb up. The snow had melted enough to make walking easier, but the trail still required careful steps. Elena felt the strength in her legs and the steadiness in her balance. She moved with confidence now, aware of each step, each sound, each change in the trail. When she reached the edge of the forest, the town was visible below. The streets looked the same as she remembered. Small shops, narrow roads, people moving quickly about their daily lives. But she was not the same. She walked with her head held high, carrying herself with a quiet confidence she had never had before. Her return to town was not easy. At first, people looked at her with surprise, some with suspicion. She had been the outcast for so long that they did not know how to see her now. But Elena did not falter. She remembered the lessons from the mountains: patience, persistence, and trust in oneself. She began seeking work again, this time with a calm determination rather than desperation. She approached local shops and guides, asking politely and confidently if they needed help. Her experience in the mountains had taught her skills that were valuable: knowledge of paths, understanding of weather, and the ability to navigate difficult terrain. Slowly, doors began to open. A small adventure tour company, guiding hikers through the nearby mountains, noticed her knowledge and confidence. They offered her a position helping travelers navigate trails safely. Elena accepted gratefully. The work was hard, but it was honest and rewarding. She felt useful, capable, and appreciated for the first time in a long while. The months passed. Elena's confidence grew as she guided hikers, helped travelers, and shared the survival skills she had learned. People began to notice her transformation. The whispers and sideways glances faded. The outcast had become someone respected, someone admired for her courage and skill. Despite the progress, Elena never forgot the mountain man. His guidance had changed her life. She often thought of him when she faced challenges, remembering his calm patience and quiet strength. She realized that he had not only taught her how to survive in the mountains, but also how to survive in life itself, to face fear, persevere, and trust in her own abilities. One afternoon, as she walked along a familiar trail near the mountains, guiding a group of hikers, Elena paused to look at the distant forest. The cabin was hidden among the trees, invisible from the path below. She smiled softly, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. She wished she could tell him how much his help had meant, but she also knew he would not need words. He had already given her everything through his actions. Elena thought back to the winter when she had first arrived at the cabin. She remembered her fear, her hunger, her exhaustion, and her distrust of the world. She had been on the edge, ready to give up. But now she was strong, capable, and determined. The mountains had tested her, and she had passed. Her life in town was not perfect. There were still challenges, moments of doubt, and days when she felt tired or overwhelmed. But she faced them differently now. She had learned that fear was not a signal to stop, but a signal to be cautious and prepared. She had learned that mistakes did not define her, but taught her lessons. She had learned that trust, patience, and perseverance could guide her through even the hardest times. Elena also learned the value of helping others. She began teaching new guides and travelers some of the lessons she had learned in the mountains: how to move carefully through difficult trails, how to stay calm in emergencies, and how to trust their instincts. She discovered joy in sharing knowledge, in seeing others gain confidence, and in knowing that her experience could make a difference in someone else's life. Over time, Elena became known as a reliable, skilled, and patient guide. People sought her out not only for her knowledge, but for her calm and steady presence. She realized that her time in the mountains had not only saved her life, but had given her a purpose. She was no longer invisible. She was seen, respected, and valued. One evening, after a long day guiding hikers, Elena sat by the small fire in her modest apartment. She thought about the mountain man, the cabin in the forest, and the lessons she had learned. She realized that the greatest gift he had given her was not just survival skills, but belief in herself. He had shown her that even when the world seemed cruel, when people rejected her, she could find strength within herself. Tears filled her eyes, not from sadness, but from gratitude. She whispered a quiet thank you into the night, knowing that somehow, somewhere, he would understand. His guidance had been the turning point in her life. She had been the outcast, but she had become someone capable, resilient, and strong. Elena's life continued to improve. She found joy in her work, pride in her accomplishments, and peace in her own strength. She never forgot the mountains or the lessons she had learned there. And though she returned to town, she carried the mountains inside her, a quiet strength, a patient determination, and the courage to face whatever life would bring next. She had survived the winter, faced her fears, and discovered the power of perseverance. She had learned that life could be harsh, unpredictable, and challenging, but with patience, courage, and trust in oneself, she could not only survive, but thrive. And as she looked out over the city from the hills, Elena smiled. She had faced the hardest trial of her life and emerged stronger than she had ever imagined. The outcast was gone. In her place stood a woman who had learned to trust, to endure, and to live fully, a woman ready for whatever the future would hold.